Greetings and welcome back to yet another episode of the Daily Run, as today we're playing as Kane. So that daily run started out really well, but then it got weird, and then it got a little bit weirder, and you'll see what the breaking points were as we actually go along. But the start was definitely very decent, because we got Tech Point 5, and it's one of those items which I think doesn't really have a negative, and that's very unusual for items in Isaac. When you think about it, even something like an HP upgrade can bring a negative alongside it, even though it's usually an objective stat upgrade because you're getting health. That can still kind of cost you maybe a devil deal sometimes, or maybe you can go to a boss trap room and maybe miss out on a good item that way. So even when you take up the simplest items in this game, it usually always has like a positive and a negative. But in the case of Tech Point 5, I really don't think there's anything bad to be said about this item. It always supplements well, it doesn't really have any bad synergies, and it only improves your damage and your run, because it always shoots alongside you. And what's even better is it shoots, I would say, you can control it when it fires. And that's something that's very important, because if you have something like Guppy, for example, sure, you spawn a lot of flies and you're dealing a crazy amount of damage, but those flies act on their own accord, and it can be very dangerous, especially when you enter a room that has, I would say, a lot of explosive enemies, because they can trigger them without you knowing, and then of course you take some damage which you didn't want to take. But in case of Tech Point 5, it's very easily controlled, and you can only shoot when you're actually pressing the fire button. I would say the only negative about it is that when it shoots at random. It's not, I would say, a predictable pattern. It's not like, for example, it shoots every other second or maybe every other shot or something like that. Of course, that would make it even better in my opinion, depending on the frequency of how fast it will be shooting. But in this case, it's random, right? It shoots maybe like after a second, and then it shoots again in like half a second, and maybe it waits another second again, and usually that's not that big of a problem. Sure, maybe it's annoying if you're trying to count it, but the main reason here is you can play around it, and it's something that really doesn't take a lot of time to, I would say, get adjusted to. And maybe besides that one aspect of it, I would say really that this item has no negatives, and I would always be glad to pick it up. If you can think of something, I would like to know, because I'm really wondering, because it seems way too one-dimensional, if that makes sense. Even something like Brimstone already has, I would say, an inherent disadvantage. Sure, it's a very powerful item, it boosts the power of your run, but it locks you to 4 cardinal directions, and this is something I bring up every so often. And of course, even though you get so much offensive punch, it maybe makes hitting or maybe killing some enemies just a little bit harder, and that's something that I feel like can be unaccounted for when you pick up a certain item. Obviously, you can never predict whether it's gonna be a good pickup or not a good pickup, because it will depend on the enemies that you face throughout the run, and you can't see into the future. And of course, if it could, then we could maybe make a little bit of a better decision. But in the average case scenario, of course, these items will always be good, but they always have a little bit of a downside to them as well. So as the run was going on here, I did say it got weird, a little bit weird at some point, and I feel like the first instance of it being weird is me deciding to pick up Key Bomb. And the reason why I did that was, I would say, kind of twofold. And the very first reason was I actually found a shop with 2 luck upgrades, which put me at 3, and then somehow there was another shop which also had 2 luck upgrades, so I was at 5. So I figured at a certain point, just because I had that 3 luck initially, I would actually get a lot of chests which I could afford to open, and of course as a result I would get a lot of consumables, but also because I'm Kane, I have the lockpick, which means I can open up golden chests for free. So the idea is I actually open up the golden chests, and they of course give me more items, and any keys that I would get in the process, of course maybe for like 7 or 8 which I need just to naturally open treasure rooms and things like that, I will give to the key bomb, because every time a key bomb picks up a key, you also get the points. So you're not actually losing out on points by donating keys to him, if that makes sense, but you're also leaving the spots open, so if you ever want to pick the keys up in the future, you can still do that and receive a sizable amount of points. So when the key bomb actually picks them up, of course, you kind of get a double value trade there, because then, of course, he can pay out with a chest, or maybe a golden chest. Of course, we can open up those for free, and as a result, of course, we can get even more consumables, and I think in the average case scenario, you're just basically getting more points than you're trading away. But the majority of the reason why I did this is just because I wanted a stronger run, and I figured, maybe eventually I'm gonna get a red chest, which is gonna have a guppy item, or maybe a golden chest, which is gonna have a damage upgrade. Sadly, none of that really happened. It wasn't really as predicted. He did drop a few chests, like I would say 8 to 10 in total, but none of them had anything substantial. I don't think I even remember getting anything more than just maybe a few bombs at a certain point, but we were very scarce on consumables. You can see we actually don't have a lot. And later on also get Bum Friend, no, not Bum Friend, but just regular Bumbo, that's the one. I get Bumbo, and then of course I give him some of my coins, and I was kind of stuck in a ditch where I couldn't generate enough consumables to actually give them to my friends so they would actually get stronger, or maybe give me items which would make me stronger, but still they were like in a weird position where I had to give up a lot of my, I would say, resources in order to try to get them stronger, but they didn't really pay out up until a certain degree. And later on then, of course, there was a 6-pip dice room, and we all know what that does. And you basically go in, everything rerolls, and you get a weird draw. And you'll see what just happened, but it was very unusual. I would say it got much harder, but at a certain point then it got a little bit easier again. That's what I said at the start. It was a little bit weird. So this, at the end of boss rush here, I actually used the Ace of Spades card to basically duplicate and teleport, not teleport, but turn everything into keys. And then of course I let the key bomb pick them up, and he gave me 3 chests, and I think and everything I've gotten out of the chest were just a few bombs and a few spiders, which is a bummer, but obviously this is something you have to expect. There's really no way to go around it. I made, I would say, a calculated decision, and I think in the average case, or at least if this was any other daily, I would have gotten better results, but it is what it is, right? I still feel like the run was decently strong. We got Capricorn, we got a few damage upgrades, and Lusty Blood is definitely, I would say, the biggest contributor to it all. And of course we still have that tech point 5 to just kind of keep going, and we're actually dealing with these rooms pretty efficiently. There were a few nasty rooms which maybe I shouldn't have really taken a detour at a certain point, just because I spent too much time there, and I felt like because I had 2 sun cards, and because of course I can have mapping with them, I would be able to go through the rooms very fast. But the problem was I didn't have any bombs, so I couldn't actually skip the rooms, which would have been ideal in this case. I got 1 bomb at the end, but sadly wasn't enough to really deal enough damage to Mom's heart here, and I missed Hush by just, I would say, a fraction of a second. If I only took a little bit less time in one of the previous floors, it could have been a bit better, but still. So I went back, of course I did the rest of exploring, and then of course I went to the cathedral, explore the entirety of that floor, and in the end I just basically beat Isaac, and I was at this point. So of course in that time period where I was in Womb 2, I found a 6-pip dice room like I mentioned before, and I rerolled, and you can see that this run is, I would say, not horrible, but it definitely isn't good. So we're Guppy at this point, so we're actually dealing a lot of damage with our flies, and Sinus Affection is doing work for us, because there are a lot of bosses in these rooms, and of course when you tag them with a few shots, not only are generating flies, but also dealing some passive damage. But definitely the annoying part of this one is 7 seals, and when you spawn the war guy who spawns explosive flies, you would think that's a good thing, but for some reason the flies are incredibly sticky to you. They don't home in on enemies like you would expect them to, but they just kind of linger around you, and their explosion radius is surprisingly big, so you can get hit even if you maybe don't expect it, and that's just, I would say, one of the negatives. And at a certain point I was just like, it doesn't really matter if I get hit, because I already got hit so many times and missed Harsh obviously, so I lost a lot of points that way. And at the end, I was just kind of making it to Blue Baby, and I just figured I need to finish this as quick as possible, pick up the trophy, and hopefully, this is gonna still be a relatively good score in the end. So of course, I pick up the trophy, and I end up in the 19th place, which is surprising, but also I did play this daily a little bit earlier than usual, so it's not, I would say, a very 1-to-1 ratio. I definitely think this is gonna drop to like maybe top 50, if not maybe a top 100, but still a relatively decent rank for what I would call a very substandard score for a run that goes to Blue Baby. So 40,000 points is not ideal. 45,000 I would have been a little bit more comfortable with, and 50,000 of course would have been just absolutely amazing. But at this point, it is what it is. We did try our best, and at a certain point I also did go a little bit wild. That's why I did decide to reroll my run, and of course it still turned out to be okay. And at a certain point I feel like the hustle is just a little bit more exciting, just having an overpowered run. We had a really strong run yesterday, so this is maybe just to balance it out a little bit, so hopefully tomorrow karma will reward us with maybe something even better. So with that said, I hope you enjoyed this one, guys, and I hope to see you next time.